Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's session on how to be brilliantly resilient in divorce, the challenge. Today, I am so excited to bring these two ladies to you. I've known Catherine and Karen for a very long time. They are the My Divorce Solution team, which includes a certified divorce financial analyst, who is Catherine Shanahan, and a legal liaison, Karen Shalou. And having both experienced divorce themselves, Catherine and Karen have combined their professional experiences in the legal and financial world to develop the My Divorce Solutions financial portrait. This is about your money, folks, your money, to help women get a grip on their finances through divorce and beyond. And we are so happy today. They are going to be bringing us 5 steps to conquering your financial fears. So I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Shanahan and Karen Shalou. Welcome, ladies. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. You know, if you're listening, believe me, we know where you are, or we were there too. So being where you were is what brought Karen and I together. We vowed to help people get through this process by conquering their financial fears. And there certainly are ways to do that. And hopefully today you get some tips on how we can help you move through this process like we did.
Yeah. Absolutely.
This is a big one for women. So this is the biggie. This is the scary space.
And a lot of people are intimidated, feel vulnerable, they're overwhelmed. But we try to approach the process in breaking down the steps, because if you can learn, or if you can be okay with taking one step at a time, every step leads to the next. And that's our goal when we work with people, is breaking it down, deconstructing it, and then assisting them through the pathway. So that's what we're going to do today in our brief presentation. We're discussing the 5 steps to conquering your financial fears. I'm going to say them all and then we'll break them down. So the first step is access. Most people have limited access to family financial data and documents. Then we're going to talk about the components, understanding the components of the marital estate. We're going to talk about interpreting those components. That's the 3rd step. The 4th step is options, knowing and understanding your options. How fun is that? Because when you know what your options are, then you have full confidence to compromise and negotiate a divorce settlement. So let's break this down. First step is access. Gaining access or knowledge of financial documents in the divorce process can be very expensive if it has to be completed in what is known as the discovery process after you hire an attorney. This is how it works. You can circumvent that costly and archaic way of processing financial documents in a divorce, however. Documentation, both digital and hard copies, is the lifeblood of all divorces. For joint accounts, get statements as soon as you can and prior to the financial institution getting wind of a divorce. Very important, because in so many cases, the financial institutions can get very skittish and not provide you with requested documents if they sense a dispute is going on. It may not be fair or right, but we see it happen so often. Make copies of any financial document you see, whether or not you know what it means.
Yeah, I want to interject in there, Karen, before we talk about using an example of a 401k. It's really important, I heard you say about when to do that, because the skittish part, you and your partner get skittish when you know that you're about to announce you want to get a divorce or you're in the divorce process. And I know a lot of people feel that divorce is being forced upon them immediately. I always say, if you feel like you're not in the driver's seat and that your spouse wants the divorce, kind of play the game along with conversations so that you can keep it in an information gathering moment. So while somebody is trying to push you into divorce, when you're asking for statements, they're more readily to give it to you if you're not in the discovery process or if you haven't started the fight of divorce. Use it to your advantage to start accessing this information. Now, what we're going to try to do is just take one example of one investment to give you some insight on how you can do that. So let's use a 401k, for example. A 401k is outlined sometimes in a tax return or on a W-2 statement. You have to remember prior employers that your spouse may have been working for. Sometimes that money is left there. So you have to recall where your spouses work. So you remember to ask for that asset. How you access it is through the companies if you can't get it through your spouse. But if you look at your current tax return or your past tax returns, the attachments that go with those tax returns are the supporting documents like a W-2. On your W-2, there'll be a section on there that shows that your spouse has been contributing to a 401k plan. You can also ask for hiring letters when your spouse became employed. The employment contracts are good places to go. And of course, I always say ask for it. If you don't ask for something, you're never going to get it. So those are some ways to access the information that you need. Excuse me, I'm kind of losing my voice.
And financial professionals, just by you knowing where your spouse may have worked prior in a prior employment, they may know the components of those retirement benefits too, because most larger companies have the same benefits. So, if it's a J&J, that they have a 401k and pension usually. So it's a good starting place to be asking those questions right out of the gate. So once you've gone around the house and in the mailbox and asked your spouse for as much documentation as they are willing to provide and collaborate with you, that's your access to documentation, at least the first pass of access to documentation. Now we're going to move on to the second step. What are the components of a marital estate? A lot of people have no idea. So in divorces, again, it's good to become familiar with those financial documents. A broad overview of the important financial documents in divorce are financial statements, income tax returns, pay statements, bank account information, brokerage account statements, loan applications, very important, business ownership records. A lot of them are called shareholders agreements, operating agreements, and so forth and so on. Real estate records, stock options, retirement accounts, pension plan information, credit card statements, insurance policies, trust agreements, and I could go on. But that's a broad overview. But again, don't let this overwhelm you. It's important that you view this process one step at a time. Go ahead, Catherine.
So if you look at the 401k example again, a lot of individuals go in and say, okay, I want to split the 401k. But do you know what the components to that 401k are? Again, you need to have this knowledge so that you make smart decisions. With the 401k, there could be a loan that's outstanding on that 401k. So if you go and say, okay, I want to split that, and then you didn't realize there was a loan, that could have a huge impact on what your net proceeds are. You have to make sure that there weren't liquidations that were made in preparation for the divorce process or post-separation, because again, if you don't ask and you don't get that documentation, you again can leave a lot of money outstanding that's owed to you. You have to also realize that another component to a 401k is that it's a tax deferred status, meaning that when you actually take income from that account, it'll be taxable to you. So what are you negotiating away to keep that 401k? Be careful that it is fair and equitable. You'll want to know part of when, so that you can compute the marital portion, the date that your spouse was hired, the date that you were hired, if it is your 401k, the date that you're married, the date that you're separated. These are all factors when determining the marital portion of that asset, which you need that knowledge before you decide on any equitable distribution from a 401k.
Very important. So we've gone over access, we've gone over components, and the access and the component piece of it is a large part of what we help clients do at My Divorce Solution when we're helping them build their MDS financial portrait, which essentially is the blueprint for their marital estate and for the negotiations. And once we've helped them step by step through that process and build their portrait, then they have the ability to conquer the third financial fear, which is interpretation. Why is that so important? Because when you're going through the divorce process, guesstimating doesn't work. especially on a financial disclosure, and especially really on any document, but the financial disclosure is what you will approach first. So some documents contain important information that may not be apparent when you first locate the document. Dates, times, places, amounts, payees, and other details may become terribly important later in the case. The values of assets at the time of marriage also may be important, especially if the marital or community property to be divided includes appreciation of separate property. Depending on your state's laws, figuring out what amount is separate property may depend on the value of an asset as of the date of marriage, the date it was received in inheritance, or the date it was received as a gift. Do you see the details playing in here? That means you may need documents going back in time as far as the date of marriage. For major documents such as financial statements, tax returns, and brokerage account statements, you may want every single page you can put your hands on. For other documents, such as those concerning a major acquisition of a business interest 7 years ago, you may want documents going back around 8 years. For less valuable assets and debts, only 3 to 5 years worth may be needed. It just depends. But what we say is, when in doubt, copy it. So
I'm going to give you an example with the 401k. This is a story, a real life story of a client who was stuck in the negotiation process, which was costing her thousands and thousands of dollars. And it quickly became evident that not only was she, but her entire team, her attorney and whoever else they used, were not interpreting the 401k or actually the brokerage account properly. What they were doing is the wife was so adamant that she had 11 accounts and that the attorney was only negotiating one account. So what they were not doing is looking at the brokerage statement for the 401k and seeing that there were 11 investments that were comprising of the one value. So because the wife was not interpreting that, because she just didn't have the knowledge, she wasn't stupid, she just didn't have the knowledge to understand that that one 401k had 11 different investments in the account, but it was only one count. So she spent thousands of dollars until she really understood that there weren't 11 accounts. It's just this one account. So it's really important to be able to interpret what each of your assets, this is just one asset, of course, we're only going through, but having that understanding and that knowledge will allow you to make those decisions.
Right, and allow you to know how that asset plays into the larger marital estate. So now that you know how to access your documents, we've gone over knowing the components. It's important to know how to interpret them because details matter. This leads us to the fourth step of options. It's important to know what you have, the multiple ways the assets and debts can be divided as it relates to tax consequences, capital gains, income. If you're dividing shares of investment accounts, which lots or shares are more favorable to you? Understand various scenarios of division from a cash flow and retirement perspective. What do you need for cash flow? What do you need for retirement? You need to be able to curate a settlement that works for you and the various options you have to accomplish that. So whether you are entitled to a 50-50 settlement or a 55-45 settlement, whatever it may be, you can curate that settlement to accomplish your goals and your financial needs.
And options are just not, I'm taking this account and he or she is taking the other account. Options are understanding, again, the investment and what options are available when making that negotiation. Again, with the 401k, you should know that a 401k can be rolled into an IRA for a non-employee spouse. You should know that market conditions could dictate to you whether you should transfer that asset in kind, meaning transfer the shares in kind, versus just saying, I want a dollar amount. You have to consider the market conditions. You should also consider the future cost basis of this asset. Again, I mentioned earlier, it's tax deferred. So when you take that money out, it'll be taxable to you. Also, there's a hardship clause that's available if you're going through a divorce. So it's a one-time withdrawal from a 401k retirement monies that you don't have to have a 10% excise tax if you're prior to the age of 59 and a half. You need to consider what your cash flow needs are in the future. Will this money be available to you if you choose to have this asset on your side of the balance sheet? Another option to consider is, do we combine all the 401ks that you're no longer working for that employer and you roll them over into an IRA prior to the divorce? That will eliminate the need for multiple quadros, which could be costly. And then you need to also consider tax equivalent yield of choosing this taxable investment versus a tax deferred, something that is easily overlooked because let's face it, when you get to this part of the negotiations, everybody has what I call divorce fatigue. Not only do you have it, but your attorney has it, your friends have it, everybody's tired of talking about it. So we run to make this quick decision without considering other options that are available to you, which then again, 5 years later, you'll sit down next to me somewhere saying, I wish I would have met you guys a long time ago. But you can do that now too.
That is why we have created the NDS financial portrait, because a lot of people think the first step in the divorce process is to contact an attorney or go to your mediator. But I can promise you that for the most part, unless you're in harm's way, the first question your attorney or your mediator will ask will be, what do you want? And how do you know what you want if you haven't taken these steps? So how beneficial is it to anyone approaching divorce to have this in place and be able to hand it over? And you can tell from our brief conversation here that it's much more than a net worth statement. This is a net worth statement, we call it on steroids, because for every asset and debt you have, what we provide to you is an understanding and also all the components that need to be negotiated that Catherine's just briefly spoken about on one type of asset. When you have this in place, then you have the ability to compromise with confidence. And that's our fifth step to conquering your financial fears. Once you know what you have, how to obtain the documents, making sure you have enough information so that all assets and debts can be interpreted from all perspectives, and you know your options, you're ready to negotiate. We are passionately committed to helping clients understand that it is not helpful to them to leave all of these steps in the hands of what we call and what you will learn if you go to litigation as the discovery process.
You know, this is my favorite part, and I hate to tell everybody this, but the truth of the matter is you do have to compromise. In divorce, it is a compromise on both sides, whether you want the divorce or not, whether you're the money earning spouse or not, each side has to compromise. But remember, just because I'm going to, again, tie it up with the 401k, because we've been talking about that asset throughout this process, is that even with the 401k, that's an emotionally charged asset. Most spouses who are working for the employer say, that is my money, I earned it, and you can't have it. That is not true. It's simply not true. If it's a marital asset, both parties are entitled to it. But be clear that just because it's emotionally charged, don't feel the pressure to walk away from it totally. There is a compromise there. Just make sure that you're getting a fair and equitable compromise here. And what's important about that is having possible scenarios prepared in advance to any discussions will enable you to make that compromise without any regret. Because the truth of the matter is, at some point, you're going to be asked to make a very quick decision. And a lot of people are so afraid to take pause and say, well, wait a minute, I need my time and my moment to figure this scenario out. You do have that option, but if you feel like you can't, it's really important to have those scenarios prepared in advance, so that you're able to do that, because I know that you want to move on. And so just be prepared to do that. As we conclude here today, Karen and I are really passionate about letting you know that you can shift the power of divorce into your own hands. And how you do that is by having financial clarity, by getting the financial literacy covered. Knowing how to go through everything that we talked about today will help you make confident decisions, because you do have the power to make the rest of your life the best of your life.
I love that.
Well, I cannot thank you enough, because I am not at the moment, I don't think, in the process of divorce. However, all of that information, knowing, I mean, most women, I think, are afraid of money. I think it's just a very common thing that we don't get it, we don't know it, and we're afraid of it. So we don't think about those things. So your advice to getting this information ahead of time as much as possible. I think that applies to everyone. And you gave us some really good thoughts today. I'm sure Kristen has more to add to that.
Well, and I'll say this, in my divorce journey, this was the hardest thing for me. I admittedly did not pay attention especially in the years of my marriage where it was clear that it had to end. I didn't pay enough attention to these documents and getting all this. And then it went horrifically sour. It was a very contentious divorce. We wasted an insane amount of money having my attorney help me figure these papers out. So everything that you guys are talking about, what I want everyone that's watching this to know is you can save yourself so many sleepless nights and so much money if you just face it. Just go get the papers, sit down with them, find a friend. Like my mom would come over. Instead of paying my attorney $1 gajillion, my mom would come, and she flipping loves file folders and sticky notes and all of that. And she would get them all organized for me because there's so many other components that you all know in divorce, one crushing me the most. So I had to get somebody to help me that wasn't the expensive attorney, but all this. And I will say my favorite thing that you guys said was compromise with confidence, because one thing that I'm certain a lot of people watching this are lacking, and this is why we're doing this challenge, is confidence. The confidence to make the right choices, to compromise well, and to have all of your priorities in order. And once you have that confidence, I promise, and I know that everyone will agree with me, it gets so much easier once you're confident.
Does.
So I appreciate all.
Yeah. It's amazing with the financial portrait, instead of bothering your mom and everyone else with your sticky notes, that's what's so great about the financial portrait, and why we hone in on this is because even though, we're 4 women here who are strong and 3 of us have been through the process. So we've already conquered all of that because we've made it. But when you're going through it and when you're in the middle of it, having our portrait, which is like a 30-page document, allows you to have that safety blanket with you, because it is scary. It's very scary when you're in the middle of it. But when you can look down and have an overview of everything that you have, and you have our recommendations and considerations and the questions to ask, you're going to find that this knowledge is so powerful that you'll find that self-esteem that you feel like you're lacking. And you won't have to apologize for not getting this information, because listen, we all do the best we can at the time we're doing it. But when you have this in front of you, you're enabled to make those smart decisions.
Tell us the
I
name of the
agree.
document again.
What was that?
What was the name of this document, this overview?
It's called the MDS, My Divorce Solution, but we've narrowed that down to MDS, Financial Portrait. So if you go to our website, www.mydivorcesolution.com, you can take a quiz. There's a lot of information there that explains it. The other thing that this portrait addresses is when you are going through a divorce, we all know it's very emotionally charged. And so people spend a lot of time in the divorce process looking for that emotional justice. So he did this, she did that, he spent all the money, she spent all the money, whatever the case may be. And they think they're going to have their day in court when the judge is going to affirm their emotions. And that's not part of the divorce process at all. And a lot of people don't figure that out until they've spent a huge portion of the marital estate. And so by going through this process, it neutralizes those emotions for both parties, because this document's a very neutral document from a non-advice position. It's just, this is it. This is what you have, and this is how the courts look at it. So instead of it being my pension, her credit card debt, or whatever it may be, it's the pension plan from J&J and the Wells Fargo credit card debt. That's for us to divide and figure out. And so just by going through these steps, you're able to look at it from a whole different perspective. So by the time you get to compromise, you're compromising on those issues that will benefit you moving forward, and not stuck in those emotions of fear and anger and bitterness and resentment. Those are for you to deal with your therapist and your divorce coaches and so forth and so on.
Awesome.
So you're compromising on facts and not emotions. And that is huge. That is huge. I again cannot thank you ladies enough. Catherine Shanahan, Karen Shalou from My Divorce Solution. Please, everybody, check them out. They have, as you know, a wealth of information, as you got by this. And not only that, but the experience to kind of hold your hand through this and allow you to see clearly, which I am sure through the fog of divorce is a challenge, especially where money is concerned. So I cannot thank you enough for joining us today.
Thanks,
Thank you
ladies.
for having us.
Thank you.